sends out a light that I might see, and the light that shines in darkness now will safely lead me o'er. If it wasn't for that lighthouse, my ship would sail no more. Everybody that lives around us, they say, why don't you tear that old lighthouse down? You see, the big ships, they don't sail this way anymore, and there's no use in it standing round. But my mind goes back to that stormy night when just in time I saw the light. It was the light from that old lighthouse, and it's standing there on the hill.
And I thank God for the lighthouse. I owe my life to Him. Jesus is the lighthouse, and from the rocks of sin He has shown the light around me, that I might clearly see. If it wasn't for the lighthouse, where would this ship be?
Thank you so much for coming today as we celebrate Vern's life. We want to extend our sympathy to the family. Vern was a godly man and a good friend to many of us. For many of us, he was a lighthouse. I asked one of Vern's friends that attends Crossbridge to describe him in 1 or 2 words. And he said he was a great friend, loyal and obedient to the Lord. And no what better words could have been said than those of Dan. Jeremiah 17:7 tells us, but blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. Vern's confidence remained in God throughout the time I knew him. He was so supportive of Crossbridge, and he will dearly be missed. The family gave me permission to read this. This is a note to Crossbridge, and this kind of sums up who Vern was. God gave Randy Williams a vision of what Ottawa First Church, which is what we used to be called, could become, and Crossbridge was born. The question becomes, is Crossbridge destined to copy and follow what other large churches have done, or is Crossbridge destined to become something the world has never seen? You have the opportunity to seek God's will for the future direction of Crossbridge. I'm praying for your success. It's exactly the kind of man that Vern was. There were times that he didn't agree with everything that was going on, but he was obedient to God, and we are blessed because of his life. This season has been filled with health issues, and Vern has not been able to attend Crossbridge as much as possible. He persevered through so many trials, including the loss of his beloved wife, Jean. But today we know that he is united with Jean and is in the presence of Jesus. James 1:12 is a great reminder to all of us. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of righteousness that the Lord has promised to those who love him. When I spoke to Vern the last time he was in the hospital, he told me that he had no doubt of where he was going. He said, I don't know when I'm going to leave this world, but I know I'm going to see Jesus face to face. And just a few short days, Jesus came and gently led him home. Vern left a legacy for all of us as faithful servants of Christ. He stood the test, he ran the race, and he received his crown of righteousness. Would you pray with me, please? Father, selfishly, I am so grateful for Vern, for the example that he was of a faithful, godly man. God, he loved life, he loved his family, and he loved you. So today as we come and we honor his life, I pray that your presence would be so very real here today. We thank you, Father, for the legacy of love that Vern has left, and we honor him today. But we know, Jesus, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he is celebrating in heaven, and for that we are so very thankful. Continue to be with this family. Fill them with your peace. Amen.
Amazing grace shall always be my song of praise, for it was grace that bought my liberty. I do not know just why he came to love me so. He looked beyond my fault and saw my need. I shall forever lift mine eyes to Calvary.
My Aunt Sharon couldn't be here today. She's out in Arizona, and she wanted to share a memory of my dad, so I volunteered to read this from her. She said, "My brother Vern was 2 years old when we moved into the house on Prairie Street where we both grew up. A year or so later, we had an imaginary friend whose name was Joe Blow. Vern did everything with Joe Blow. They sat together at the kitchen table. They played with trucks in the corner of the garden that Dad left bare for him to use. When people asked to see Joe Blow, Vern took them to the garage and pointed to a large, dirty glass jug. Sometimes Dad, Vern, and I sat on the couch in the living room singing songs from the Golden Songbook we used in school at the time. Of course, we had to make room on the couch for Joe, but not near me because I might squish him. Mom sat in the corner chair darning socks. When she finished, she would throw the rolled up socks at us. We would have a snowball fight. If Vern hit the lampshade or an ashtray, it was always Joe Blow's fault. Joe always joined us on the floor reading the Sunday comic papers while Dad listened to baseball games on the radio. One day, our mother noticed a strange smell coming from the table where Vern and Joe sat. Our Uncle Axel, who lived down the street, came over and took the table apart. There, in the tubular chrome leg of the table that was so popular in the 40s and 50s, now referred to as mid-century, was a stash of rotten green peas. My brother was not fond of peas at the time, and he blamed it on Joe Blow. Mom did not think it was funny, so Joe Blow was banished forever. I am so proud of the man my brother grew up to be. He loved the Lord and shared his faith with many. He was a wonderful husband and father who raised 4 amazing children. While I already miss him, I know I will see Vern again." That was from my Aunt Sharon.
Really is surreal to be back here already. I grew up in the shadow of a good man. A man absolutely captured by the grace of God in his life. He knew he didn't deserve the attention of Jesus. He was so thankful for it. There's a couple of passages that I think sum up Dad's life, what I would call a life verse or a life passage. My brother Eric's going to share one in a bit from the prophet Jeremiah. The other one comes from Revelation chapter 12. It says this: "They overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony." This verse captured Dad's attention, along with other overcoming verses. He realized the purpose of Jesus coming to us was so that we wouldn't live defeated lives, just stuck in sin and brokenness and unhealthy patterns, or even stunted by the different challenges and struggles that come our way. Jesus came and overcame sin and death so that he could empower us to become overcomers. And like I said, this captured Dad's attention, and he created this little motto, and he would tell himself and share it with others: if you're going to be an overcomer, you got to have something to overcome. And so Dad embraced this personally in his life, and I got a front row seat to see someone's life transformed as Jesus made Dad an overcomer. Even more than that, I had a dad who helped me embrace the life of an overcomer. There's so many stories and situations that I can share, but let me just give you a few what I would call life-defining moments that stand out to me. The first, if you know my family at all, was when my world turned upside down. It was my 8th grade year, and I began to have these crazy body spasms, like full body seizures. We didn't know why. And while that was incredibly painful and a scary time in my life, everything felt out of control, but my dad was fighting for me. Every day I would see him praying for me. Every day he would pray over me. He spared no expense, took me to see every doctor that he thought was the best doctor. He took off so much work to drive me to one appointment after another, one hospital after another. But on top of all of that, Dad felt led by God to do this incredible amount of research to find out the ingredients of every single medication these doctors were putting me on and all of their interactions and side effects. And this was before there was a Google or a Chat GPT. Just a big book. And Dad was cross-referencing everything. It was actually my dad who discovered I was having reactions to all of the different medications I was on. And so he took a stand to protect me. He took a step of faith to pull me off all the meds. And God moved to bring this incredible healing in my life. But I'll never forget that it was Dad and Mom who were helping me overcome by loving me enough to fight for me. In case we missed that lesson, Dad showed it to us again and again by how he stood by Mom with all of her health battles, never wavering, never stumbling, but always moving to lift her up. And I'm so thankful that we have a dad who would fight for us and do all he could to help us. Something I think I love even more is that Dad was always with me. And what I mean by that is this: sometimes to overcome, we have to do the hard work, but we never have to do it alone. I don't think I was the kid that got in the most trouble, but I'm the one that did it with the most flair. Like when I was 16 and I got pulled over for speeding in our driveway. There's nothing like seeing the lights of a cop car light up the house of the head of probation for the LaSalle Bureau and Grundy counties. And there's nothing like seeing your dad come out the door, the head of probation, and know that cop who just pulled me over by name. I was humiliated to be pulled over in my driveway, but I really felt like I'd let Dad down. No longer the shining example of Vern's son. I got my ticket, saw the date of my court appearance, took a big breath and walked inside the house. I expected to get an earful from both of them. But Mom and Dad never said a word about it other than to ask me, "Kirk, are you okay?" "Yeah." "All right." And that was it. The day came for me to go to court, and Dad was waiting for me in the dining room at the dining room table. He'd taken off work to go with me, and it wasn't just to drop me off and wait in the car. No, he came in and he sat with me. And when it was time for me to stand before the judge, Dad got up and stood there with me before the judge. And seeing him, the judge said, "Hey, Vern, is this your son?" "Yes, he is, Your Honor," Dad replied. And then turning to me, he said, "What's your name?" And following Dad's example, I said, "Well, Kirk, Your Honor." "Well, Vern, don't you have other kids?" "Yes, Your Honor, I have 2 daughters and a son." And then the judge looked at me and again said, "I've never seen any of them here before." And I got the message. After that, Dad gently led me over to where I paid my fine. Yes, I had to pay my own fine. And later I learned that Dad had 3 lawyers come and offer to make my ticket go away, and that the judge had done me a favor because he liked my dad, and the fine should have been much higher. But the real lesson I learned was that to overcome, sometimes I have to do the work, but I never have to do it alone, because I had a dad who was willing to walk with me every step of the way. In recent years, Dad moved in another way to help me overcome, and that was by being one of my biggest cheerleaders. There's never been a doubt in my mind that Dad was in my corner, and he would always let me know. And sometimes it would be on a Sunday morning after I'd preached, because he would be watching us on the live stream, and I'd get a text from him following church. "That was a great message." Wow, I really felt God moving in your church today. The last one he sent me was, have you been reading my mail? Because your message was just what I needed. Other times I would call and I would share how discouraged I was over something that wasn't happening as fast as it should, or something that I was facing. And Dad would just pause our conversation and say, son, let me pray for you. And we would pray. And while I knew that he prayed for me and us, it meant a lot to flip through his prayer list, his prayer journals over the last week as we were going through the stuff at the house. And I would see my name on his prayer list. And it wasn't only when I had a problem, but as you keep flipping through, my name was under the praise side, as Dad would share that with his small group. And I knew that he was celebrating the victories with me of what God was doing. In just about every conversation, Dad would encourage me not to shrink back from the challenges I face, but to be bold and to be courageous. And then he would bring out that motto, son, if you're going to be an overcomer, you got to have something to overcome. And every time he said that, I knew that I could keep going because I knew God was going to make a way. And I knew my dad was in my corner. It's December 2nd that Dad came home from the hospital for the last time. And while we were in the hospital room waiting for the ambulance to come to transport him home, I turned to Dad and I grabbed his hand in mine. I said, hey, old man, we're getting ready to walk the last mile of your life on this earth. It's going to be hard. And there's going to be some challenges. But my dad's pretty smart. And he always said, if you're going to be an overcomer, and Dad finished it, you got to have something to overcome. And I squeezed his hand and I said, and that's what we're going to do. And I'm going to be with you every step of the way. I'm in your corner, just like you've always been in mine. The morning Dad passed, Eric told him he was going to read from Psalm 25 for Dad's morning devotions. Dad was always such a good example to us of daily seeking Jesus. And he pressed into him because Jesus is the ultimate overcomer. And he led all of us to look to Jesus, the one who is always fighting for us, who is always with us, who is always cheering us on. And that morning, Eric had just read these words from the first two verses of Psalm 25. To you, O Lord, I lift up my soul. Oh my God, I trust in you. And with that, Dad stepped into heaven to see Jesus and to be reunited with Mom. He did not lose his battle with this disease that he faced. My dad overcame his last battles because of Jesus. And Jesus walked him home. So Dad, I don't know if you're able to hear any of this today. But if you can, I just want to say thank you for showing us what God can do in our lives if we let him lead us. Thank you for fighting for us, for standing with us, for cheering us all on, for being a good example to us. And I love you.
can I say thanks for all the things you have done for me? Things so undeserved, yet you gave to prove your love for me. The voices of a million angels could not express my gratitude. All that I am and ever hope to be, I owe it all to thee. To God be the glory. To God be the glory. To God be the glory for the things He hath done. With His blood He has saved me. With His power He has raised me. To God be the glory for the things He hath done. Just let me live my life and let it be pleasing, Lord, to Thee. And should I gain any praise, let it go to His blood He has saved me. With His power He has raised me. To God be the glory for the things He hath done. To God be the glory for the things, for all the things He hath
One of the things I really value about funerals is that we see people that we don't hardly ever see. Some people I haven't seen since I was just little and went to the Meyer Christmas parties, and so good to see the family. People that I grew up here in this church and have been friends of my mom and dad for years, and I really appreciate you making the effort to come out and to testify to your friendship. And to all of my dad's bowling buddies, I would talk with Dad every week, and he was always quick to give a report on how he had bowled that week, and he just so enjoyed that shared experience with you. Thank you for coming and serving him this last time. When people ask me to describe my dad, I typically say I had a front row seat to watch how God took a drunken sailor, all of the dysfunction that implies, and turned him into a beautiful child of God. There's a reason my dad's favorite songs ring with gratitude. He was and is keenly aware of his sinfulness and brokenness, but he also knew that God had forgiven him. God was helping him to become something lovely, something really good. This issue of becoming something more was central to my dad's life and testimony. Every morning I would come down the steps for breakfast to find my dad in his recliner reading scriptures and asking God for help for the day. And if I found him asleep every now and then, that's okay. He was intentionally seeking God and asking God to make him a better man and to prepare him for what God planned to do that day. One of the reasons Dad chose probation as a second career is because he wanted to help people who are just as messed up as he was, is how he would explain it. He would say, if God can change someone like me, he can change anyone. Even in retirement, Dad seized every opportunity to share his testimony, whether it was volunteering at the soup kitchen or chatting with friends at the bowling alley or simply encouraging the nurses at the hospital. Dad had experienced the real and good difference that God can make, and he was eager to share this good news with everyone. One of Dad's favorite scriptures explains it this way from Jeremiah 18. This is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you my message. And so I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hands. And so the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him. Then the word of the Lord came to me, O house of Israel, can I not do with you as this potter does? My sisters and I were born into the home of a very broken man. I don't say that to shame my dad. Please don't misunderstand me. But insecurity and addiction and uncontrollable rage had made it hard to be around Dad. Kirk was born 7 years later, and he testifies to the fact that it seems like I grew up with a completely different set of parents than what the older brothers and sisters had experienced. And Kirk was right. Dad met with the potter every day. He actively sought the help of God every day. And God made it possible for my dad to grow into a different person. Most of you saw that almost finished product. The loving and kind man who spoke with confidence about our loving and our kind God. The generous man who was eager to help and to share whenever he saw a need. The faithful man who cared for my mother for years with patience and with tenderness. God did really good work with my dad. He made it possible for Dad to be more than a drunken sailor, and he makes it possible for me and my family to be more than the children of an alcoholic. Dad's turn toward Christ began when a coworker who seemed to have more peace of mind than anybody else invited him to come to dinner. And so Mom and Dad went to Jim's house for dinner. And then Jim invited him to join a Bible study, and they said, yes, we'll come and we'll be part of this Bible study. And little by little, God gave my dad good reason to believe that God is real and that God is good and that God desired a personal relationship with him. Shortly after becoming a Christian, Dad had a crisis of faith. His naval career put him at the elbow of the admiral who was charged with preparing the Navy for the 21st century. It was a really good job. But God had stirred a desire within my parents to move back to Ottawa to buy out an almost defunct Christian bookstore. So after much prayer, my parents took a chance on God. They poured their life savings into the store, into sharing the hope of God with others, and they moved us into a very small house on Prairie Street. My grandparents didn't understand. Nobody really expected my parents to succeed, but my parents experienced real provision from God. God worked through that season to grow their connection to him and to prepare them for what would come later in life. You see, God wants to shape his people. He wants to strengthen his children and to fill us with joy. But God never forces his changes on us. We have to seek it. We sometimes have to risk for it. But if we position ourselves, God the potter will make us into something beautiful. There are other times of testing and refinement. There was a significant betrayal that cost my parents everything that they had saved. And I watched them struggle through that season of life. And I watched them pray through to where they could forgive. And then I saw the peace of God that came into their life. there was this significant illness with Kirk. And I remember Mom and Dad saying that the doctor said, leave him here with us. We really don't know what's going to happen, but if you take him home, he'll probably die, is what I remember from that period of time. But my dad did what he always did in the crisis. He prayed. And during that time of prayer, God revealed the solution to Kirk's need. I remember talking with Dad about how unhappy he was in marriage. That's never something that you want to hear as a child. My dad did what he always did when there was a crisis. He prayed. And Mom had that illness. She started to have problems with her heart, and Dad really became intent about praying for my mom. And over that worst season of life, God renewed my dad's love for my mother, and they finished well. Dad decided to be a godly husband instead of a frustrated husband. And later on, when I struggled in my marriage, that good example saved us. Even in this last year when illness made him weak and grief could so easily have overwhelmed, Dad kept asking, what's next, O Lord? Dad would gladly have joined Mom in heaven, but Dad had also made a decision to trust the potter. He wanted to fulfill all of God's dreams for him. And the week before Thanksgiving, Dad acknowledged, I feel like I'm slowly ebbing away. But then he'd talk about his bowling buddies. You saw that ball that we had here in the casket. The only unfinished business that my dad had was taking that new ball and trying it out there on the lanes. He'd talk about his church buddies. You are so very precious to him. And he talked with me about the next Bible study he was studying for and preparing for because he wanted to continue to serve and to share that hope of God. My dad should have been a wreck of a man. If all I had to go off of was what we experienced as children, I probably wouldn't be here today. But God made it possible for my dad to become something that was loving and good. And I deeply admire that man. And I will be comparing myself to him for the rest of my life. As we head towards the close, I just have to ask, are you willing to turn towards the God who loves you, who wants to make you good and to fill you with joy? When the day of testing comes, because days of testing come to all of us, will you choose to trust God and to do what you can to nurture your connection to God so he can nurture you? And will you choose to meet with the potter every day? Will you let God reshape you and make you a trophy of his grace? We're going to close with a song that Dad sang so much when we were children that I still have it all memorized. It speaks of the saving work of Jesus. It's based off of Jesus' last words from the cross, it is finished. Dad sang it because it reminded him of his decision to finish or to end his resistance toward God. We share it today because Dad has fought the good fight, has finished the race, is receiving the crown of glory from the God who has always loved him, the God who made it possible for my dad to be loving and good.
You see, there's a line that has been drawn down through the ages. And on this line there stands an old rugged cross. And on that cross there's a battle. And it's raging for the gain. Man's soul or its loss. On one side march the forces of evil, all the demons and all the devils of hell. But on the other, the angels
voice of the conflict, and the sun refuses to shine. For there hangs God's Son in the balance, and if through the darkness He cries, it's finished, the battle is over, it's finished, there'll be no more, it's finished, the end of the conflict, it's finished, and Jesus is Lord. Yet in my heart the battle was still raging. Not all prisoners of war had come home. They were battlefields of my own making.